So there's a lot of people that have been reporting on BRICS, the BRICS nations, and they talk about things like, oh, these countries are dumping the dollar, and as they're dumping the dollar by selling U.S. Treasuries or not doing trade, not holding U.S. Treasuries, that it's somehow impacting the dollar. And what you're watching is the waging of economic warfare. So you don't have to you don't have to physically enslave people to make them slaves. This was a topic that was discussed in the Bible where Jesus had said to the people, if the Son sets you free, you really are free. And of course, he was talking to the people in Israel at this time. Overwhelmingly, he was referring to religious leaders. And I will make the economic implication. I know a lot of times people don't like to listen to spiritual things about the Bible, but it's important to understand the concept. And so, in talking to those people, he had said their reply to him when he made that statement that if the Son sets you free, you really are free. They said, we're not slaves. We are from the son. We're not of the slave daughter Ishmael. We're from the descendants of Isaac. Right, indicating that their lineage was not from Hagar, who was an Egyptian slave under Abraham, that they were the legitimate son. Right, this thing of Game of Thrones. Right, you had Jon Snow. Jon Snow was given this name of Snow because he was a bastard child. So he had no inheritance to his father's and title, etc. And this is the implication that Jesus was making. And so then he went on to say that every doer of sin is a slave of sin. And so because these individuals were still slaves spiritually, they were not real sons of God, and therefore could not inherit the promises of their father as an inheritance, right? Just like if I die, I leave an inheritance to my children, right? But the illegitimate children don't receive an inheritance because they're not recognized by me. And so this is what Jesus was trying to show to the people at that time, that even though you claim to be sons of the Father, you're actually illegitimate because you're actually a slave sold into bondage. Now, of course, he's referring to spiritually. Going back to what is going on here. So in the system that we live under debt slavery. And so everybody that participates in the system is a slave to debt. And so this is why globally we live under global slavery, because all of these people are in essence in bondage. They're in bondage to debt. And so many of these people are seeking ways to free themselves. And so the BRICS, and what many people are discussing, they're trying to in essence break away from the dollar. And so people look at this articles like these where it says here, BRICS dump another 17 billion in U.S. Treasuries in 1 month. And of course, what's happening is that America is not releasing debt. They do trade in debt. Like in America, we do trades in dollars. In China, they do trades in their country, in their currency. In Mexico, they do trades in their country, etc. In every different country, they do trade within their own currency, but globally, to buy commodities, they do trades in the dollar. And so this keeps them enslaved to the hegemony, the system, the monetary system of the United States of America. And so every country that exists under that umbrella, in essence, is a slave to the government, because that government prints those dollars out of thin air. And so as these countries, think about it like many of the retired Americans who are on a fixed income. And so they get X amount of dollars each month. And so as we have inflation and the price of goods and services, start to go higher, it devalues the currency that they have saved that's given to them month after month. And so it's the same premise with the countries. These countries go out, they labor, and then they're able to get X amount of dollars for their labor to then go out and spend in the global economy, where they're able to buy goods and services like commodities, etc. Now, these are commodities producers. And so they go out and they buy treasuries that are just as good as having dollars, but it gives them a little bit of an interest rate. And so when America raises interest rates because they've created all of this inflation, and then they sell treasuries at a higher rate than the treasuries that they hold, they are devaluing their treasuries that they're holding. The same way that if I was holding on to dollars and the government created more dollars, it devalues the currency that if I was a retiree, I had. And so what this does is it causes inflation. And so what you end up with is in essence, this is where the global socialism comes in, where you do not own your labor. Neither do these countries who participate in this system own their labor, because the U.S. government can then go out there and print excess dollars and steal their labor because they've labored for X amount of dollars that they're able to hold on to. And then the government prints more money, throws that money out into the system to buy your commodities that you've physically labored for, right? Your body has gone out there and you've done work. This is where, like in Bitcoin, they talk about proof of work. And that's what gold and silver was, because for that commodity to be dug out of the ground, it takes work. Whereas if you just print or create dollars into a computer screen, there's no work that is taking place. It is just a proof of repaying via debt, via slavery. And so this is the global monetary system that nations live under. And this has gone on for a very long time. And so for many of these people who are looking at this scenario and they're like, look, all these governments are dumping dollars, and that's not what they're doing. They're trying to push back because these current countries buy gold. They buy actual money. And so it says BRICS dumped a total of 17.4 billion in US Treasuries in September of 2023. The latest data from the US Treasury Department highlight that China, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia sold the highest last month. Why did they sell? Because they don't have dollars, and they need dollars to go out and do transactions. If they want to buy commodities in other countries, well, then they need dollars. So again, they bought debt, meaning I sell you, let's just say, as an example, I sell $1,000. I say, if you give me $1,000, I'll give you back 2% on that $1,000. So I take in your money, I give you an IOU $1,000 plus 2% for X amount of years, right? Then I create, within several years, I create $1,000 IOU, but now instead of giving 2%, I'm now giving 4%. I just devalued the treasury or the IOU that you're holding. Now, people use these IOUs or treasuries and they use them as leverage. So they take that money and they put it up as collateral for whatever project that they're going to do. And so they say, hey, I have this treasury. This treasury is good for X amount of dollars, and it gives a 2% interest rate. And so when the U.S. government, create a IOU worth 4%, as an example, it cuts the value of the IOU that you have by 50%. So then when you use that and you put that up as leverage, now whatever you put up, whatever you're leveraging for, right, whether it's a stock or a building, etc., now the banks come back and they say, hey, your IOU is worth 50% less, so you owe us more money as collateral, because you got to put up X amount of collateral. Like if you do, trading on margin for stocks, it could be 25%, it could be 50%, etc. Whatever the bank requires to fund you for whatever project that you're doing or whatever holding that you're holding on to. And of course, they charge you an interest rate. Now, for these countries, the reason that they're selling the treasuries is because they need dollars. And they're actually not selling them at face value because they're not worth face value, because of the government raising interest rates have devalued their treasury. And so nobody wants to buy them at the market rate. Nobody wants to buy them at what they bought them for. the market rate for those US Treasuries is worth less. And so this is the global economic warfare that you're seeing taking place. And so people look at the US debt clock, and you have a lot of people that talk about that this is unsustainable, that we need to pay back the debt. And I would say that you completely are looking at this system entirely wrong, because as long as I'm able to scribble down on a piece of paper what currency is that I'm going to give you for your hard asset, oil, gold, whatever commodity that I need, wheat, right? And all if I do is just create these currencies out of thin air and you're willing to accept it, you've taken an L. And so the longer that people are willing to do that, the longer you're going to hold that L. Well, I guess I should do it this way, right? And so people asking, and people keep saying, oh, we need to pay down this debt, that this system is not sustainable. And I say that it is, because as long as those people are enslaved mentally to believe that this system is beneficial to them, well, then it is to our benefit to continue to put these dollars out into circulation. And so the U.S. trade gap, of course, narrows. And this is what the trade gap is. Basically, I offer a good or a service, and typically you can exchange that good or service for something of equal value. Well, America has a huge trade deficit, which means that, let's just say as an example, I create $100 worth of work via services and goods, right? Stuff I can sell, t-shirts, hats, etc., right? Those are goods. A economy is just goods and services. That's all that it is. And an economy that is expanding is offering more goods or it's offering more services. And people are willing to go out and do business to get that good or to get that service. And so the American government is able to offer $50 worth of goods and services and get back 100. And that's what a trade deficit is, where we're trading less, but we're getting more. Now, of course, this is taking place in that the country can just type in numbers into a screen, and then give that currency out to the global economy for them to do trade in. And this is the slavery of this is the system of slavery that was implemented a very long time ago. And this is the whole point of social Marxism. This is what Marxism is where you no longer own your labor, someone else. It's owned by, quote unquote, the public, which is just a euphemism for the government. The government owns everything. And so as the government is limiting the amount of currency that is available to these BRIC nations, it forces them to dump treasuries at less of what they bought them for. So they're taking a loss so that they can have liquidity, because they have no liquidity to be able to go out into the global market that is created, right, the global system, and they need dollars. And they're not able to get them because the American government is not pushing those dollars out. And so it forces them to sell their asset that pays an interest rate, right? If it, who is it? The Biggie Small says, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right? And that's what a U.S. Treasury does. A U.S. Treasury, it gives you an interest rate, just like if you bought housing, if you bought a dividend stock, your money is working for you. And of course, the way that America is able to combat that system is by throwing out. And it's just like in video games and MMOs, right? When people do gold duping, what does that do? It completely devalues all the work that people went out and did in farming for items, for commodities, if they were in New World, if they were farming ore or plants, etc. And then someone just creates that currency out of thin air. Well, then it's completely devalued all the work that you put in to be able to bring those goods to the global market, because they put no work into creating. This is what the United States government does. And this is why I say that we live under a global socialist communist system where the government is able to create currency out of thin air, buy hard assets. And this is why people who talk about this topic about BRICS selling U.S. treasuries, if you were actually to see the U.S. debt clock go down that would be something to worry about, because it means that the government is no longer able to continue in that system, and we actually have to work for the stuff that we need, which means that America wouldn't be able to get the goods and services from other countries just by typing numbers into a screen. We actually would have to have proof of work. And that's when people should worry. Not that the debt clock is expanding. This is irrelevant as long as the system continues. You can run this U.S. national debt as high as you want. It's all here. It's all in the mind. It's all in the mind of the people globally who are willing to accept this Ponzi scheme. And this is why, when you look at, remember, I talked about this before, that when people realized that FSB, that bank in California, was bankrupt, the stock of that price, it was very high. It was like a $200 stock. And it came down and then went straight down, because the perception of the people matched the reality. And so when that happens, things go to zero. And that's when currencies go to zero, is when people's perception matches the reality. As long as people are willing to accept dollars and fiat currency as a source of value, they will retain value. But when people realize, wait a minute, you're just creating paper out of thin air and giving it to me for my hard asset, then that currency goes to zero. And that's when countries go to war. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for watching. Feel free to leave your comment below. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will check you next time.